Did John Lennon predict the internet in a long-forgotten 1968 interview? London, 1968. A city ablaze with revolution, art, and a restless hunger for the future. In the swirling psychedelic haze, a mind unlike any other was already peering beyond the horizon. John Lennon, the prophet of a new age, was about to articulate a vision so profound, so far ahead of its time, that it would be dismissed as madness. But what if, in a long-forgotten interview, he truly predicted the internet? The year is 1968. London was the epicenter of a cultural earthquake. The Beatles, at the zenith of their influence, were pushing boundaries not just in music, but in art, philosophy, and consciousness itself. The air was thick with the scent of incense, the sound of sitars, and the intoxicating promise of a new way of seeing the world. John Lennon, our ever the seeker, the provocateur, was at the very heart of this maelstrom. He moved between his Weybridge estate, the Apple Corps offices in Savile Row, and the vibrant, chaotic art scene of the city. His mind, a restless ocean, churned with ideas, questions, and a profound curiosity about the future of humanity. He was experimenting with sound, with art, with his own perception of reality, often fueled by the era's mind-altering substances that promised to unlock hidden dimensions of thought. It was in this fertile ground of intellectual ferment and altered states that John found himself in a small, unassuming London studio, sitting for an interview. The interviewer, an earnest but conventional journalist, was primarily interested in the band's latest album, their personal lives, the usual celebrity fodder. But John, in his characteristic fashion, quickly steered the conversation into deeper, more abstract territory. He spoke of universal consciousness, of telepathy, of a future where human minds would be connected, sharing thoughts and information instantaneously. He spoke of a nervous system for humanity, a global web of communication that would transcend physical boundaries and traditional media. The interviewer, struggling to keep up, dismissed it as abstract ramblings, the fanciful musings of a psychedelic visionary. But decades later, as the world embraced a technology that mirrored Lennon's wild predictions, this long-forgotten interview would resurface, revealing a chillingly accurate prophecy, a glimpse into a future that only a mind like John Lennon's could have conceived, a future that remained invisible to the rest of us and until it became our present. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John Lennon. The name itself was a beacon, a lightning rod for a generation. In 1968 London, he was more than just a musician. He was an oracle, a cultural shaman. See, his mind a conduit for the zeitgeist. His environment was a whirlwind of creative intensity and intellectual exploration. The hallowed halls of Abbey Road Studios, where the Beatles were crafting their most experimental work, served as his laboratory. The air was thick with the scent of old tape, the hum of cutting-edge equipment, and the potent aroma of boundless possibility. He was surrounded by a close-knit circle of artists, thinkers, and fellow seekers, all pushing the boundaries of what was possible. His days were a blur of intense recording sessions, philosophical debates that stretched into the early hours, and deep dives into esoteric texts, Eastern philosophies, and avant-garde art. His iconic round glasses, once a symbol of intellectual curiosity, now seemed to magnify the world's hidden patterns and revealing connections invisible to others. He was a creature of habit, yet constantly seeking disruption. He'd drive his psychedelic Rolls-Royce through the bustling streets of London, a solitary figure behind tinted windows, observing the world that adored and reviled him in equal measure. He was a man of the people, yet increasingly isolated by the sheer force of his own genius, his thoughts often too complex, too far-reaching for conventional minds to grasp. His relationship with Yoko, though still nascent, was already a powerful, almost telepathic bond. She was his muse, his intellectual sparring partner, his mirror, encouraging his most radical thoughts. But even her avant-garde sensibilities sometimes struggled to keep pace with the sheer velocity of John's mind. He was an architect of sound, but increasingly, and he felt he was building something far grander, something that transcended music itself. He was glimpsing a future, a global consciousness, a way for humanity to connect that defied the limitations of the physical world. And in a small, unassuming interview room, armed with nothing but his restless intellect, he was about to articulate this vision, a prophecy that would be dismissed as abstract ramblings, but would, decades later, prove chillingly accurate. The interview was set in a cramped, slightly stuffy room in a BBC building in central London. The equipment was rudimentary, a reel-to-reel tape recorder, a couple of microphones, and the earnest, slightly bewildered face of the journalist, a man named Alistair Finch. Finch, a veteran of pop culture interviews, was prepared for talk of albums, tours, and the usual Beatlemania. He was not prepared for John Lennon. The conversation began innocuously enough, discussing the White Album, the band's latest experimental foray, but John, restless and intellectually charged, quickly veered off script. He spoke of the limitations of traditional media, of newspapers and television, as fragmented, controlled narratives. He spoke of a deeper human need to connect, to share, to truly understand each other beyond the filters of authority. "It's all so slow, isn't it?" John mused, leaning back in his chair, a cigarette burning between his fingers. "All this talking, all this writing, we're still sending messages like pigeons, but the mind moves faster. It connects. It sees patterns." Finch, scribbling notes, looked up, confused. "Are you talking about telepathy, John?" John chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. "Or telepathy, yes, but not just between two people. Imagine if everyone could just plug in. Plug their minds into a giant, invisible network, a nervous system for humanity. All the thoughts, all the ideas, all the information, just flowing, instantly, everywhere." He gestured vaguely with his cigarette, as if sketching the invisible network in the air. Finch, struggling to keep up, tried to steer him back to music. "So, a kind of global consciousness then, like a collective dream." John's eyes, usually so sharp, seemed to glaze over for a moment, seeing something far beyond the confines of the room. "More than a dream, Alistair, a reality, a way for everyone to know everything, instantly, to share, to learn, to create, without borders, without delay, a giant, invisible library, a global conversation, a new way of being human." The seeds of a global mind, a concept far beyond the comprehension of 1968, had been sown, dismissed as abstract ramblings, but destined to bloom into a chillingly accurate prophecy. Alistair Finch, the interviewer, tried to bring John back to earth. He asked about the technicalities, the logistics. How would this nervous system work, John? Through wires? Satellites? John, however, was less interested in the how and more in the what. He spoke of a technology that would be invisible, pervasive, connecting everyone, everywhere, regardless of their location or social standing. It won't be like a telephone, Alistair, John explained, his voice gaining a prophetic edge. It'll be like the air, always there. You just tap into it. A screen, a box, a little device you carry, and suddenly, you're connected to everyone, to all the knowledge, to all the voices. He spoke of instant communication, of sharing art, music, and ideas across continents in mere seconds. He described a world where geographical distance would become irrelevant, where information would flow freely, democratizing knowledge and empowering individuals. Finch, though intrigued, found himself increasingly bewildered. He noted down phrases like global brain, instant access to all human thought, and a world without secrets, but he categorized them as the abstract musings of a psychedelic visionary, perhaps influenced by the era's counterculture philosophies and mind-altering substances. He saw it as poetic metaphor, not a literal prediction of future technology. John, sensing the interviewer's skepticism, grew more animated. He spoke of the potential for both good and ill, the power to unite, but also the power to divide, the freedom of information, but also the danger of misinformation. He saw the dual nature of this unseen network, a tool that could either elevate humanity or plunge it into deeper chaos. He was describing the internet not as a utopian dream, but as a complex, double-edged sword, a concept far too nuanced for the technological limitations and societal understanding of 1968. The unseen network, a mere fantasy in the mind of a genius, was slowly, inexorably taking shape in the ether, waiting for its time to arrive. The interview was nearing its end, and Alistair Finch, despite his best efforts, felt he had failed to extract the conventional celebrity soundbites he needed. John Lennon, however, was not done. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Finch, a sudden intense clarity in his gaze that cut through the earlier abstract musings. "Alistair," John said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet resonating with an unnerving conviction. "Imagine a world where you can see anyone, talk to anyone instantly, a world where you can learn anything, create anything, share anything, with just a thought, no more waiting for letters, no more limited broadcasts, just connection, pure, unadulterated connection." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But imagine also," he continued, his voice now tinged with a subtle, chilling warning, "that this connection can be used to watch, to control, to spread lies as easily as truth, to create echo chambers where people only hear what they want to hear, a world where everyone is connected, but perhaps are more alone than ever." Finch, initially dismissive, felt a shiver run down his spine. The casual, almost playful tone had vanished, replaced by a stark, almost prophetic seriousness. John wasn't just speculating, he was seeing. He was describing a future that in 1968 was utterly inconceivable. Video calls, social media, the spread of disinformation, the paradox of digital connection leading to real-world isolation. He then spoke of a specific moment, a global awakening that would be triggered by this network, a moment when humanity would either embrace its potential for unity or succumb to its capacity for division. He described it with such vivid detail, such unsettling precision, that Finch felt a profound unease. It was a glimpse into the future, a chillingly accurate premonition of the Internet's dual nature, and its power to both enlighten and enslave. In that moment, John Lennon was not just an artist, he was a reluctant prophet, burdened by a vision too vast, too complex for his own time. The interview ended, the tape recorder clicked off, and Finch, shaken, dismissed it as the ramblings of a genius on the edge. But the seeds of that prophecy had been sown, waiting decades to germinate into a reality that would forever change the world. The interview, once transcribed, was deemed too abstract, too philosophical for the popular music magazine it was intended for. Alistair Finch, the journalist, filed it away, dismissing John's global nervous system as an interesting but ultimately irrelevant tangent. The tape, a mere reel of magnetic ribbon, gathered dust in an archive, was its contents long forgotten, amidst the torrent of Beatlemania and John's subsequent, more conventional pronouncements. John Lennon, too, moved on. His focus shifted to political activism, to his personal life, to the relentless pursuit of peace. The global nervous system became another fleeting idea in a mind overflowing with them, a concept too far ahead of its time to be fully articulated or understood. He continued to be a visionary, but his prophecies were now more grounded in the immediate social and political landscape. Decades passed. The world changed. Technology advanced at an exponential rate. The Internet, once a concept confined to the realm of science fiction, slowly, inexorably, became a reality. Personal computers, modems, email, and the World Wide Web, each innovation brought humanity closer to the nervous system John had described. Then, in the early 2000s, a researcher delving into forgotten archives for a documentary on Lennon's philosophical musings stumbled upon the long-lost interview. The tape, brittle with age, was carefully digitized. As John's voice, young and vibrant, spoke of global brains and instant connection, the researcher felt a chill. The words, once dismissed as abstract ramblings, now resonated with an unnerving accuracy. The nervous system for humanity was no longer a metaphor, it was the very fabric of modern life. The forgotten prophecy had been unearthed, revealing a chilling testament to John Lennon's unparalleled foresight, a man who had glimpsed the future decades before it arrived, a future that was now our present. The rediscovery of the 1968 interview sent ripples through academic and technological circles. John Lennon, the rock and roll icon, was suddenly being hailed as an unlikely prophet of the digital age. His abstract musings, once dismissed as the product of a psychedelic era, were now seen as a chillingly accurate blueprint for the internet, social media, and the complex, interconnected world we inhabit. The interview became a subject of intense debate. Was it pure genius, a lucky guess? Or had Lennon, with his restless intellect and perhaps a touch of the era's mind-altering influences, simply tapped into a collective unconscious, glimpsing a future that was already forming in the ether? The answer remained elusive, shrouded in the enigma of his extraordinary mind. Yet the story leaves us with a profound question. What does it mean when an artist, a musician, can articulate a technological future decades before its inception, not just in broad strokes, but with unsettling precision, even foreseeing its dual nature for both good and ill? It forces us to reconsider the boundaries of human perception, the blurred lines between genius and madness, and the power of foresight. John Lennon, the man who urged us to imagine, had, in a long-forgotten interview, imagined a future that became our present. His words, once dismissed as rubbish, now echo with the undeniable truth of a world transformed by the very network he described. The London of 1968, with its vibrant counterculture and technological innocence, could not comprehend the magnitude of his vision. But today, as we navigate the complexities of the internet, we are forced to confront the unsettling possibility that some minds are simply too far ahead of their time, burdened by visions that remain invisible to the rest of us until they become our reality. The tape, once gathering dust, now plays on, a haunting testament to a genius who perhaps knew too much. It asks us to consider, what if the greatest prophets aren't found in ancient texts, but in the restless minds of artists, glimpsing futures that remain invisible to the rest of us until they become our present?